What if the greatest threat to a nation was not an army, a missile, or a weapon you could see, but something much harder to detect? Something that does not attack infrastructure, borders, or physical systems, but instead targets how people think, what they believe, and how they understand the world around them. Because today, modern conflict is no longer limited to land, sea, or air. It is happening inside the human mind. Across the world, governments are beginning to recognize that influence itself has become a battlefield. Not influence through force, but influence through information. Carefully designed messages, repeated over time, shaped to create doubt, division, and confusion within societies. These are not random events. They are coordinated efforts built using data, technology, and deep understanding of human behavior. And the most concerning part is this: most people never realize it is happening. There are no alarms, no warnings, and no clear moment where the attack begins. It blends into everyday life, into news, into social media, into conversations. This is the new reality of modern warfare, and it raises a critical question. If influence can be weaponized, how do you defend against it? For most of history, warfare was visible. Armies moved, borders changed, and conflicts could be seen and measured. There was a clear distinction between war and peace. But today, that line has become blurred. Conflict can now take place without a single shot being fired. It can happen through screens, through networks, and through the flow of information that people consume every day. This new battlefield is not physical. It is cognitive. It exists in the space where people form opinions, make decisions, and interpret reality. And unlike traditional warfare, it does not require large armies or expensive weapons. It requires access to information systems, an understanding of human psychology, and the ability to reach large audiences at scale. This shift changes everything. Because when the battlefield is the human mind, the goal is no longer to destroy infrastructure. The goal is to influence perception, to shape how people see their country, their institutions, and each other. Information has always been powerful, but today it can be used with precision. Digital platforms allow messages to be delivered directly to specific groups of people based on their interests, behavior, and beliefs. This means that influence is no longer broad and general. It can be targeted, personalized, and repeated until it becomes familiar. Foreign influence campaigns often use this system to introduce small shifts in perception. Not dramatic changes, but subtle ones. A message that creates doubt. A story that reinforces division. A narrative that slowly changes how people interpret events. Over time, these small shifts can accumulate, leading to larger changes in public opinion. This is not about convincing everyone of one idea. It is about creating uncertainty, confusion, and disagreement. Because a divided society is easier to influence, easier to destabilize, and harder to govern. These operations are built on a deep understanding of how people think. Human attention is limited, and people tend to focus on information that confirms what they already believe. They respond to emotion, repetition, and familiarity. Influence campaigns use these patterns to shape how messages are received. Content is designed to trigger emotional reactions because emotional content spreads faster and is remembered longer. Messages are repeated in slightly different forms to make them feel familiar. And over time, familiarity can create a sense of truth, even when the information is not accurate. This process does not feel like manipulation. It feels like normal information flow. It feels like people are simply forming their own opinions. But in reality, those opinions may be shaped by systems operating behind the scenes. One of the most important features of this new form of warfare is its scale. A single campaign can reach millions of people across multiple countries at the same time. Messages can spread rapidly, crossing borders instantly and adapting to different audiences. At the same time, these campaigns can be highly localized. The same system can deliver different messages to different groups, depending on what is most likely to influence them. This creates multiple versions of reality where different groups of people are exposed to different narratives. This fragmentation makes it difficult to identify what is true and what is not. It also makes it harder for societies to maintain a shared understanding of events. And without that shared understanding, trust begins to weaken. When influence operations target a society, the goal is not always immediate disruption. It is often long-term instability. By slowly weakening trust in institutions, increasing division among groups, and creating uncertainty about information, these campaigns can reduce a nation's ability to respond effectively to challenges. This creates a situation where people no longer agree on basic facts, where public debate becomes fragmented, and where decision-making becomes more difficult. In this environment, even small disruptions can have a much larger impact. This is why governments are beginning to treat information and perception as matters of national security. Because protecting infrastructure is no longer enough. Protecting how people think and understand the world has become just as important. In response to this new threat, countries are developing what can be described as cognitive defense systems. These are not physical defenses, but structural ones. Systems designed to protect the flow of information, increase transparency, and reduce the impact of coordinated influence campaigns. This can include improving how information is verified, increasing awareness of how influence works, and building systems that can detect unusual patterns in how content spreads. It also involves working with technology platforms to better understand how algorithms shape what people see. The goal is not to control information, but to make the system more resilient. Make it harder for external actors to manipulate perception without being noticed. But this leads to a deeper question. If influence can be detected, and if systems can be built to resist it, how effective are these defenses in reality? Can a society truly protect how its citizens think and perceive the world? Or is this new form of warfare too subtle, too adaptive, and too deeply embedded in everyday life? Because understanding the threat is only the first step. The real challenge is stopping it. If influence can be used as a weapon, then defense must also evolve. But defending against something you cannot see is not simple. There are no clear lines, no physical barriers, and no obvious point of entry. Instead of stopping armies, these systems must detect patterns, filter signals, and strengthen how people process information itself. This is what makes cognitive defense different from any form of protection that came before it. It is not about stopping an attack at the border. It is about recognizing it inside the system. The first challenge is detection. Influence campaigns do not announce themselves. They are designed to look natural, to blend into normal conversation, and to spread gradually. Because of this, governments and researchers focus on patterns rather than individual messages. They look for unusual activity, sudden spikes in content, or coordinated behavior across multiple accounts and platforms. These patterns can reveal when something is not organic. For example, when the same message appears repeatedly across different networks, or when large numbers of accounts begin promoting similar ideas at the same time. Detection systems are designed to identify these signals early, before they spread widely. But even with advanced tools, this process is not perfect. The line between organic discussion and coordinated influence is often difficult to define. Another important part of cognitive defense is understanding how platforms themselves shape information. Algorithms decide what people see, what gains attention, and what fades away. These systems are designed to maximize engagement, but that same design can also amplify misleading or harmful content. To address this, there is growing pressure for greater transparency. Governments and institutions want to understand how these systems work, how decisions are made, and how content is prioritized. This does not mean controlling algorithms directly, but making their influence visible. Because if you cannot see how information is being filtered, it becomes much harder to understand how perception is being shaped. Cognitive defense is not only about technology, it is also about people. A system is only as strong as the individuals within it. This is why many countries are focusing on building resilience at a societal level, helping people understand how information flows, how influence works, and how to recognize patterns of manipulation. This does not require complex knowledge. It often begins with simple awareness, recognizing that not everything seen online is neutral, understanding that repetition can create familiarity, and familiarity can influence belief, encouraging critical thinking without creating fear, because the goal is not to make people distrust everything, but to help them question more carefully. Technology platforms play a central role in this system. They control the environments where information spreads, and they have access to data that can reveal how content moves across networks. Because of this, they are increasingly expected to take part in defense efforts. This can include identifying coordinated campaigns, reducing the spread of harmful content, and improving how information is labeled or presented. However, this also creates challenges. Platforms must balance responsibility with freedom of expression. Too much control can limit open discussion, while too little can allow harmful influence to spread. Finding that balance is one of the most difficult aspects of cognitive defense. Even with detection systems, transparency efforts, and public awareness, cognitive defense has limits. Influence campaigns are constantly evolving. They adapt to new systems, change their methods, and find new ways to blend in. As defenses improve, so do the techniques used to bypass them. This creates an ongoing cycle. Defense systems must continuously adapt, update, and improve. There is no final solution, no permanent protection. Instead, cognitive defense becomes a continuous process, something that must evolve alongside the threat. One of the most important aspects of this system is that it cannot be managed by governments alone. It requires cooperation between institutions, technology platforms, researchers, and the public. Each plays a role in maintaining the stability of the information environment. Governments can set policies and coordinate responses. Platforms can manage how information spreads. Researchers can analyze patterns and identify risks. And individuals can make decisions about how they engage with information. Together, these elements form a layered defense, not perfect, but necessary. As technology continues to develop, the nature of influence will also change. New tools will make it easier to create realistic content, to simulate voices, and to generate narratives at scale. This will increase the complexity of the information environment and make it even harder to distinguish between what is real and what is designed. This means that cognitive defense will become more important, not less. It will become a central part of national security alongside traditional forms of defense. Because in a world where perception shapes reality, controlling perception becomes a form of power. So we return to the original idea. Modern conflict is no longer limited to physical space. It operates within information systems, within networks, and within the human mind. If influence can shape how people think, how they decide, and how they understand the world, then protecting that process becomes essential. Because once perception is controlled, everything else can follow. And if that is true, then the real question is no longer whether influence exists. It is whether we are truly aware of how it is shaping us. If you enjoyed this exploration into the hidden forces shaping our world, make sure you subscribe to the channel and join us for more great documentaries still to come.